Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
Exactly 40 years ago, on October 6th, 1973, a very hot Saturday morning, as Jews all over the world, including Jews in the state of Israel, gathered in synagogues to observe the holiest day of the Jewish year, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack in an effort to deal a serious blow and, if possible, to eradicate the state of Israel. There is no way to overstate the sense of impending doom that this surprise attack, with an overwhelming number of Arab soldiers and Arab tanks and armaments supplied in the main by the Soviet Union, there is no way to overstate the feelings of an impending doom that gripped many in the state of Israel and throughout the Jewish world. Caught napping, with Israel's largely civilian army all in synagogue for Yom Kippur, the few, very few, active Israeli soldiers on the Egyptian and Syrian fronts were enormously outnumbered and at a severe military disadvantage. And yet, the incredible determination and heroism of those Israeli soldiers stationed in the Sinai and on the Golan Heights worked something of a miracle, and at a terrific cost in human blood and life, literally staved off the Arab onslaught until Israel was able to mobilize its civilian army, counterattack, and ultimately rout both the Egyptian and Syrian armies. In the north, the surprise Syrian attack in the Golan Heights was aimed at one strategic hill, named the Hill of Saki, or in Hebrew, Tel Saki, where a very small band of elite Israeli paratroopers and armored soldiers, outnumbered there 100 to 1, held the line for 3 days. 35 of their number lost their lives in the Battle of Tel Saki. Virtually every one of the survivors was injured. Yet the Syrian army of 11,000 soldiers with 900 tanks was never able to break through the line at Tel Saki, and the Battle of Tel Saki was forever etched in the annals of Israeli history as a defining moment of Israeli military courage and triumph. And today, no Israeli completes his or her basic training without touring Tel Saki, seeing the museum that memorializes this incredible moment in Israeli history, and learning the Israeli lesson of Tel Saki, that the bond of friendship and love that unites the men and women of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, is the very essence and indeed the reason for the transcending soul of the state of Israel. And on this very, very special edition of L'Chaim, I am humbled to welcome to this table one of the Israeli soldiers who survived the Battle of Tel Saki, Dan Almagor, a remarkable human being, a lovely human being, who's devoted much of his life to keeping the memory of his fallen band alive and teaching the world of the miracle of Tel Saki during the Yom Kippur War. There are many, many ways in which Dan has kept the memory of Tel Saki alive. He's been instrumental in a museum at Tel Saki. And he's the producer of a marvelous film, a wonderful film that chronicles the events of those horrific days in the words of the surviving soldiers themselves, including his own words, which are extremely moving. And the film is entitled The Battle Over the Soul, which, thanks to Dan Almagor, you'll be able to see here on Shalom TV. And Dan, I can't thank you enough, first for taking the time to be here, but also for the lifetime of service you've given to the state of Israel and the Jewish people, and in some way, Dan, to the entire world. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So there are so many questions I want to ask you. First of all, why the name? How did the name The Battle Over the Soul become the name of your film?
So the ultimate decision was done by the director
Yes.
of the movie, Yuval Dalshad, very talented young man. It was, and he followed us with a camera in a very sensitive manner, peeling the onion of our most difficult inner thoughts, for a better part of 8 years. So when the time came to determine a name, his determination was, it was his determination, make the final determination, the final vote, was that the impact that such a tremendous experience, horrific experience, has on one's soul for the rest of their lives. He wanted to focus on not military, which sometimes it's very hard, as you explained, to comprehend, but rather on this perpetual price of the soul. It could have been the soul of the nation. It could have been a soul of the individuals, the soul of a band of brothers. So it was an inclusive, the soul. He really referred more to the soul of us as Jewish people.
Mm-hmm. Let me push you a hair more. The Battle Over the Soul. What's it mean? What is the name in Hebrew?
Akrav ala nefesh.
Okay. Is there a battle over the soul at Tel Saki? Do you think? Incidentally, I'm not here to. I'm not criticizing the name.
Yes.
It's just that, in essence, first of all, the battle was with the Syrians.
Yes.
The story that is told, and you're a major voice in this film,
Yes.
is this story of friendship and love and a bond and this incredible human ability to transcend what you went through, not only simply in battle, but a major part of the film that people will see is how you survived as a group, the group that did survive in this bunker.
Yes.
When you were vulnerable. You understand it is by a miracle that any of you ever got out of that bunker alive. It's
Yes.
just an extraordinary story. So I had trouble with the name because the battle did not seem to be over the soul of Israel. It didn't. I did not see the battle over your soul, or Menachem's soul, or Yaya's soul, or any of this story. So I said to myself, there's something I must be missing. So I ask you again, just to
Yes.
clarify it one more time. If you are happy with the title, what does it say to you?
It's a very profound question, and I'm glad that, because I'm one of your biggest fans watching the program L'Chaim, and I love
you.
the program, and
Thank you.
love the way you conduct your interviews. I do think you are one of the best,
Thank you.
and that's why I'm here today. So we wanted to present a picture to the world of 20 years old, people that had dreams and loved each other and wanted to do things in the future and travel and build houses and build homes. That even our experience in the army, in the paratroopers, in the special unit that we served, in this elite unit, we were 20 years old. So the producer built us as human beings, as 19 and 20-year-old, with the soul of a 20-year-old, not different than any other part in the world. And what happens to one's soul when it goes through this traumatic life and death decisions that are based on saving other people, of selfishness. This is what Ido Aroni, the ambassador of Israel, said last night. He talks about the selfishness of the story of Tel Saki.
Yeah, I want to make sure we get through. It's really selflessness.
Selflessness.
In English, it's the
Selflessness.
Yes.
Selflessness.
Of the Israeli soldiers who were at Tel Saki.
Yeah, selflessness.
Yes.
And what this traumatic experience does to one's soul when you lose not one or two or three, you lose 35 of your best friends, then what it does to one's soul.
Mm-hmm.
So
Then what did it do to your soul?
it really destroyed my soul at the time. And it was not the fighting part, the actually, shooting. It was when we reached after 3 days and conquered the hill of Tel Saki back, and the bodies of our best friends were laying around, and we had to make sure that we went one by one to make sure that they were not booby-trapped.
Yes.
And this is not strangers. This is people that you spend time with and you love. And to go and kneel down next to them, and while people shooting at you at the same time and making sure that their body are not booby-trapped, and touching each and every one of their bodies and writing a note of their names and where you found them. This vision of death, of loss of love that will never be, it really injured my soul.
It tears one apart, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And the price, I'm not sure if you want to get there to this point, but as the fog of the battle was dissipating, and I was standing on top of this hill, and to our north, seeing these thousands of Syrians moving forward and running away, and there were like 6 of us left standing.
Amazing.
It was 6 of us standing. We had maybe 5 tanks with us. Were 6 of us standing, and this vision of seeing to our north the Syrians running away, and then near us the 35 bodies of our best friends. This vision that's when I made a promise that I'll do everything possible in my power to tell the world that the impossible happened and why it happened. The essence of what happened.
Mm-hmm. Did it make you bitter?
It did not make it bitter.
Isn't that amazing, by the way? It didn't make you bitter.
No.
In some way, it injured your soul.
Yes.
But you went on to create a life and a family that is productive and beautiful, yes?
Yes.
Why do you think you were able to endure without becoming bitter?
I have this conversation with God once in a while. Sorry if I'm getting a little bit emotional, but I ask the question, what's the reason that this 35 young 20-year-old died and I'm here? What's the reason? And am I living life in a way that honors those my friends that actually did not return from this Battle of Tel Saki? And I made a promise then that one day I'll have enough power and might to be able to tell the world about the story of what happened in Tel Saki.
Mm-hmm.
The question of why I survived and they didn't, it's on all our minds. All the guys that survived, we all feel the same way.
Mm-hmm. I want to take a step back with you now.
Yes.
People are going to watch the film.
Yes.
They're going to learn all about the details.
Yes.
For this conversation, I just want a sort of a summary from you,
Yes.
so that anybody who has not yet seen your film or does not know of Tel Saki will have a sense of it. By the way, I should tell you something. I go to Israel often,
Yes.
and I often go with a camera crew.
Yes.
I visited your museum and the entire Tel Saki scene. And we had the guides in Israel are out of this world. We had a guide, Lieutenant Colonel David Raz, who was in the Yom Kippur War, and he took us on a very windy, blustery day. Yeah. You know those Golan Heights can be very windy, blustery.
Yes.
And we sat there mesmerized while for about an hour he described where the tanks were coming from, what you guys did, how you ended up in the bunker, on and on and on and on.
Yes.
So to meet you personally, I consider it an extraordinary honor, and it gives me chills. But for me, there is a personal connection. Many in our audience have never been to Tel Saki. Many will be hearing about Tel Saki for the first time. So let's just do a summary. We'll let the movie speak for the detail. Fair enough?
Yes.
Okay. let me tell you what I remember easily, and then you fill in any detail you think I'm missing.
Okay.
It's Saturday, it's a morning, you guys are basically lounging around, and then somebody radios to somebody, and there's also this El Al headquarters.
Yes.
You're in, are you called Tel Saki from the beginning?
No, we call it El Al.
Okay, El Al.
We call
and
El Al.
there's a group of you.
Yes.
40 some odd people, right?
A little bit less,
Okay,
yes.
a little bit fewer. And meanwhile, somebody says, there's something going on. We want you to send a scouting party, in essence. At that point, it didn't occur to any of you that there was going to be a major Syrian assault on the Golan Heights. So far, correct?
Almost.
Correct me.
So we came to the Golan Heights about a week before the war broke. And we were put in charge of routine activities, anti-terrorist activities, lookouts. The morning of Friday morning, before the war, October 5th, we did an observation into Syria. And as simple soldiers, we looked, and not realizing that it will be a full-scale war, but there was no question in our mind that something was going to happen.
Really?
Because they moved into aggressive positions. They dismantled the mines in between Syria and Israel. But we thought, because a week before the war, Israel downed 13 Syrian MiGs, that it was very common at the time that they will down some of the airplanes, and then they will attack us for the day, and that will be the end of the story. The morning of Yom Shabbat, Saturday, October 6th, we were already at 10 o'clock in the morning, maybe 10:30 in the morning. We got from Central Command orders to go and man Tel Saki, which was an observation post, a reconnaissance post, primarily typically unmanned unless something was about to happen. It's a very strategic hill that overlooks the entire area of the southern Golan Heights. And in order to send some of our special unit paratroopers, in the event there will be something transpired, for these 5 individuals not to fight a war, but rather to report what was happening. It was a very strategic, because Israel, having a very small army, they needed to determine if something's going to happen, take place, whether it's going to take in the southern sector of the Golan or the northern sector. So they had a similar position on the very northern sector of the Golan Heights, and Tel Saki actually overlooks the main area where the Syrians are very likely to penetrate into Israel.
How many of you go from El Al to Tel Saki?
5.
Only 5.
5. 5 and a driver.
5 and a driver. You're not one of those 5.
I'm not one of those 5.
Okay. What do they report?
In the beginning, they get to Tel Saki around noon, and they report nothing. You know, the 2 out of the 5 were Orthodox, and since they were stopped in the Yom Kippur prayer, tefillah, they decided, since nothing is happening, they're going to continue the prayers, you know, from
The Machzor.
the Machzor, you know,
Prayer
for Yom Kippur, waiting for something to happen. Quiet. Everything at that point was totally quiet.
Okay. At some point, these 5
Yes.
say there's something going on here.
At some point, this point, by the way, did not come from them yet.
It did not.
No, because at 2 o'clock exactly, at 2 p.m., the Syrian army probably now estimated between 1,200 to 1,400 cannons, and the Syrian airplanes at once started a bombardment that lasted approximately 2 hours. Tel Saki was included. They targeted very accurately and specifically the bunker in El Al, all the civilian villages in the Golan Heights, and Tel Saki.
Okay. But just for our audience's sake, we
Yes.
should mention, we all know there's an airline, El Al. This has nothing to do with the airline. In essence, this main camp below Tel Saki had the same name, El Al.
El Al was an army base,
An army base.
which was the command for the southern sector
Okay.
of the Golan, where our paratrooper were situated.
Okay.
So after the 2 hours bombardments, Menachem is telling us over the radio.
We should tell who Menachem
Oh,
is.
I'm sorry.
No,
Menachem
okay.
was our commanding officer. And I think for the audience, it's very important to understand and put it in perspective. We were 20 years old.
You're 20 years old.
We're 20 years old. After very rigorous training, paratrooper training for elite. Some of us were in different elite units. So getting to this particular unit was like reaching Mount Everest for us, to fulfillment of our dreams. Menachem was 21 years old. He was the immediate commanding officer of the special unit, and the commanding officer for the entire southern sector of the Golan Heights. Later became general, but at that time was a colonel, was 27 years old.
And he was named?
Yahya,
Yahya.
Yair Yaron.
Yes, he was
Yahya.
called Yahya.
Yahya, everyone in Israel knows him as Yahya.
Okay. And we should let our audience know if they see this film, when they see this film, Menachem is in the film, has a major role, a major voice, I should say, in describing, is extraordinarily honest. By the way, all of you are so honest in this film. It is such a gift that those of you who spoke give to us in telling us this range of emotions that you dealt with, not simply the facts, but there's an enormous story of emotion here, where you were scared, when you wanted to leave, when sometimes there was conflict, not conflict with, but there were situations, and I'm not giving anything away. At one point, you're in this bunker,
Yes,
and there's a wounded soldier who has a very hard time being quiet,
yes,
to the extent to which Menachem says, we have to strangle him.
yes,
It turns out it was never necessary.
yes,
We see him in the film at the very end of the film,
yes,
and he says, quite honestly, if I had been Menachem, I would have made the same order. My point is that this film is, excuse the phrase, brutally honest
yes.
and wonderfully honest.
Thank you.
Okay, so Menachem is a figure that we hear, and Menachem says quite honestly, I wasn't equipped to do this.
No,
I'm 21 years old.
yes,
Yahya was something different. He had a certain kind of experience and maturity that it seemed to me everybody relied on. But Menachem said, this was beyond what I could do.
Yes.
And at one point in the situation, he even requests from Yahya the permission to withdraw. And Yahya says, no, we'll come to that.
Yes.
Okay. Menachem is the head
yes.
of the group that's at Tel Saki.
Yes.
You're not there yet.
No.
Fill us in.
So about at 4 p.m. on Saturday, Menachem is telling us over the radio that he sees a division of Syrian tanks. And as paratroopers, I was with Yahya in a bunker in El Al, which is a few miles south to Tel Saki. And Yahya, on our end, doesn't believe that Menachem knows what he's talking about, because as paratroopers, we've never seen a division of tanks. We're paratroopers. We fight, we're infantry, army.
A division is very large.
Division is very large.
It's
hundreds.
incomprehensible that there would be a division.
Yes, it was
Okay.
incomprehensible. So Yahya asks Menachem, count. He said, count. And he counts, and he sees at least 100 Syrian tanks near the bottom of the hill of Tel Saki. And 100 tanks, it's a major force. At the time, Menachem had only 2 tanks protecting him, to just put it in perspective. There were more tanks in the area, but at that time. Understanding the gravity, and understanding now that thousands of Syrian soldiers break through the main line and move south towards Israel, Menachem initially said, would he ask for permission to possibly retreat? And since now we understand that that was the only means for Israel to determine if the major attack is going to come from the south or the northern sector, the answer is no.
It was critical that you had eyes
Yes.
at this Tel Saki hill.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And therefore, although it was life risking,
Yes.
Yahya says to Menachem, you have to stay. Okay.
Yes. And I just want to touch one point.
Please.
So some of the, I want to call it peculiar or greatness. We don't like to talk in those terms of bravery. But what Menachem does with 5 guys at Tel Saki, that as night falls and the Syrian army sends their infantry commando to see what's going on in Tel Saki, and night falls. So for the next 10 hours, 9 to 10 hours, Menachem with 5 guys drives them absolutely crazy in 2 or 3 tanks by the time, to a point that the Syrian army reports back to the main command that they encounter a tremendous force, and they have to stop near the Tel Saki because overnight to determine the size of the force in the morning.
Okay, I want to make sure our audience understands this. And by the way, to me, this was one of the in the literal sense of this is a fantastic story. So with 3 tanks
Yes.
and maneuvering them here, there,
Yes.
and firing, Menachem is able to give the Syrian the impression
Yes.
that there's a major Israeli force, not this, there's nobody there.
Nobody there.
But he gives them the impression that there is a major force and they stop moving.
Yes.
And Menachem should get tremendous credit for that.
Yes. Yes. Again, as a 21 years old, he situates the 5 guys, and that's one thing that we were trained to do. We change position, and the tanks, I must say, the tanks doing a phenomenal job. Probably each one of them destroys 25 to 35 tanks, each one of them. But as night falls, the Syrian army has infrared night vision that the Israeli tanks don't have. Menachem is trying to improvise and help them by shooting some, mortar, to create some light or some light in the area. But the essence of the story is that they stop and they don't move until 5 o'clock in the morning.
So in essence, that's one day.
Yes.
He survived one day now.
He survived at this point one day.
Okay. Pick it up. What happens the next day?
At 5 o'clock in the morning, in the meantime, in parallel, Tel Saki is near a settlement or kibbutz called Ramat Makshimim, which is near Tel Saki. Not all the civilian citizens from Ramat Makshimim evacuated. Yahya wanted to make sure that every single civilian evacuate, because that's the front line. So he's asking one of our units that was in the bunker with us at El Al, led by Beni Hanani and by another guy, Pitts, Ariel Weissman, to go near Ramat Makshimim and ascertain, they give enough time, they position themselves in ambush, and in the event the Syrian army advances, the civilians will be able to retreat. So during the night, some buses come, Beni Hanani and Pitts stay in ambush, and some front reconnaissance force from the Syrian army indeed pass Menachem and reach Beni Hanani. Again, there were 14 guys in these two vehicles. They engaged this reconnaissance force, hit all of them but one, and this one vehicle goes back, retreats back to the Syrian lines, and again tells them a report that there is a tremendous force that they encountered. They destroyed 5 of their vehicles, and it causes another hesitation. Menachem from Tel Saki, which now it's just half a mile away from Ramat Makshimim, he is signaling stress because he can see the perspective that Menachem can see is phenomenal, the view, and he can see now the Syrian army, thousands of tanks. The way Menachem described it is like something in the US will be, if one goes to tailgating, that will be an equivalent to any major football. I don't want to mention any names of specific football teams, but imagine that that's what happened. But these people don't want to have fun and drink beer. They're coming to kill us and annihilate the state of Israel. And Menachem transmits that he is with very few and he needs reinforcements. Beni Hanani, that went to yeshiva with Menachem and grew up with Menachem, so did Pitts, the sergeant, asking Yaya to go towards Tel Saki to help Menachem. However, one point which is important to make, one of our Israeli tanks that was damaged during the first few hours, he's coming towards El Al to get some parts and some ammunition. In a way, he passes Beni Hanani and Pitts, and he's telling them that Tel Saki is hell and not to dare going towards Tel Saki. He continues another mile south to El Al, and he repeats the same story. So now, Beni Hanani and Pitts are armed with the knowledge that from Menachem that he tells all of us that there's like thousands of Syrian infantry and tanks. And this guy that was an officer of IDF armored division is repeating the same story. Beni, rather than go back to El Al and retreat, is insisting and begging and imploring Yaya to go and help Menachem. Yaya already understands that there are hundreds of tanks, so he's not going to send 2 armored vehicles towards Menachem, and says, no, I need to concentrate my forces as much as possible to stave the attack, the Syrian attack. But Beni Hanani, I think at one point, Yaya, because I was right near him as far as you and I are sitting here, he understands that even if he says no to Beni, Beni is going to go anyway. And he said, you know what, go, don't be a hero, just grab him if you can, if not, stay there and wait until the real army is going to come. So these 2 APC vehicles from really dilapidated, driving this mile towards Tel Saki, Menachem is trying very hard to signal them that the Syrian army is parked on the other side of the hill because they cannot see. And the Syrian, a battalion of the Syrian commando takes position, and these 2 forces come together. The 14 guys of our paratroopers charge, and within 3 to 5 minutes, all perish. Mm-hmm. Now we know in retrospect, listening to their communication and the books that they've written, they thought that these two vehicles were just a front force, was a reconnaissance force of something much bigger.
That's what the Syrians thought.
That's what the Syrians thought. So here again, they're waiting. Now, although it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and they look at the Tel Saki and they see there's nothing there, and they're about to move, and here these two vehicles attacking them. No one in their right mind would think that these two vehicles attack an army of 11,000 Syrian soldiers.
Yes, it's crazy.
It's just incomprehensible.
Yes. And yet they had to do it.
They had to do
They
it.
had to do it. You knew these people,
Yes,
and you mourned their loss.
yes.
Yes. All of them die.
All but two.
All but two. Okay.
Out of the 14, 12 died.
Okay.
And there are 20 of us left in the bunker in El Al. When we hear that the first rescue force for Menachem perishes, and our commanding officer was Knaim, I'm introducing a new name, it's Knan. He was 22 years old. He was our platoon commander, our company commander. He asks Yaya to go and see what happened to Benny Hanani and Ariel Pitts, Ariel Weissman. And Yaya said, I have only the last APC
What's an APC?
armored carrier, personnel carrier.
Armored Personnel Carrier, APC.
APC. And he says, I have only one armored APC left in the whole southern region of the Golan. I'm not letting you go there. But he, again, comes the friendship and the love towards each other. And he says, I'm just going to go there. I will not do anything crazy. I will just go and just snatch him and bring them back. And when he
We're talking about the 5 who were there, correct?
Yes.
Are there 5 still alive?
The 5, no. My best friend, Ronnie, was shot in the face and dies.
So there's 4 of them left.
4 of them left.
And so what he's suggesting is we'll take this last APC. We're not going to be heroes.
Yes.
We have one mission. We're going to go, collect those 4 guys, and
Yes.
bring them back
And
to
bring
El
them
Al.
back. Yes.
Okay.
And when he turned into the bunker, when Itzik 9 turned into the bunker, usually those APCs carry 6 and a driver. When he turned back into the bunker, every single soldier, warrior, paratrooper in the bunker stood up and wanted to go.
Yes, it's an incredible part of the film where ultimately they're going to send this APC, and the guy who's doing it turns around and says, I need some volunteers.
Yes.
Every single soldier there stands up.
Yes.
All 11. And they all want to go, and they all do go.
They all do go. So they actually, we hear in radio that actually they're engaging, and we hear with open radio that actually conquering this little hill next to Tel Saki. And we're thinking, well, maybe it's not that horrible. But sure enough, when they reach the top of the crest of the hill and they see on the other side the sight of like thousands, they engage them, and also most of them died.
Yes. So you've now lost 2 attempts
Yes.
to sort of rescue Menachem and the 4
Yes.
who are still alive and bring them back.
Yes.
Then what happens?
Now there's 6 of us left in a bunker.
In El Al.
In El Al.
Only 6.
That's it.
And
Yaya believes, and we all believe, that everyone at Tel Saki is dead. We already know that there were thousands of them. We see the Syrian army advancing and stopping about 400 yards or 500 yards from the fences of the bunker in El Al. They're stopping. And so we are convinced that basically everyone in Tel Saki has perished. About soon thereafter, someone from the second rescue attempt, a guy named Meir Bruckenthal, reaches us on foot and is telling us that Yitzhak Nan is gravely injured, he's not dead, and he's hiding in between the rocks near Tel Saki. Him and one more soldier that survived the second attempt. So Yaya now is determined to go, no matter what the price is, to rescue Yitzhak Nan. And he's trying to convince some tanks that already made their way up that was a worthwhile mission. But they have their own command to create a very strong line near El Al and not to retreat. And as we're contemplating, we hear on the radio, and you saw in a movie yesterday, like you hear something from the other side. I hear my best friend Shlomo Avital in code, speaking in code. Yaya's name, you never use actual name, you use codes. He said Yaya's number was 10. He said 10, this is number 1. And we hear like voice from, because in the meantime, I want to add that Menachem already runs out of ammunition. There's another drama that we're going to be, I know you're trying to reach to my portion.
Yes.
So Menachem is telling all of us goodbye. We're not going to see each other anymore. Thank you for everything you've done for me, over and out.
He basically says goodbye to Yaya,
He does.
and Yaya says goodbye to him.
Yes.
They think they will never see each other again.
Yes. So here comes, I'm going back to El Al, and we hear suddenly Shlomo Vital on the radio speaking. It's like hearing someone from the other side say, oh my God, you cannot use names, but they're saying, Avital, this is me, it's Dan. And Yaya understands that, and we speak to him. What's the situation? Bad. Don't worry, we have the entire Israeli army, we're reaching you in few minutes. Hold on, end. And that was one of the way the Yaya kept.
Yes, make sure everybody understands this was a lie.
It was a lie.
There was no Israeli army about to come and save them.
No.
But Yaya believed that if he gave them hope,
Yes.
they might survive.
Yes. Because they are in this small concrete bunker in Tel Saki that maybe one day, if they put it underground and put all the protection on top of it, maybe it will become a bunker. But we call it a bunker. It was just a concrete nothing, It's
Like a sukkah.
Yes.
The concrete sukkah.
A
there.
concrete sukkah, exactly. A concrete sukkah. In this concrete sukkah now, there are 5 of the paratroopers. Ronnie is dead. And there are another 23 tank guys that their tanks were destroyed, and they all made it to the small room. The Syrians that conquered Tel Saki, meanwhile, throw 5 or 6 grenades into this little room. That's a miracle by itself, how anyone can survive so many grenades. But with the bodies of the fallen friends that already perished, the bodies of the fallen friends absorbed the grenades.
Yes, incredible story.
And the Syrians, like every infantry army, it's trained around the world. You throw the grenades in, and then you're going in, and you shoot everyone that's there. It's finished. It's not something that we trained. Every army trains, but they don't go in. They don't go inside, into this bunker. Menachem realizes that he has no more ammunition. He feels that he's about to die, and he's asking one of the people, whoever can stand, to go outside and give themselves up to the Syrians in order to save all the other 27 guys in the bunker, in this little room.
This sukkah.
The sukkah, concrete sukkah. And one of them, Yitzhak Neckerger, goes outside, and the Syrian soldiers are right there, and they signaling him in Arabic, like, how many people are in there? And he was a tank guy, so he's thinking about the crew of a tank, there's 4. So he's signaling them 4, 3, he's saying to them in Arabic, 3, khalas.
One has survived.
One survived, this is me, and they take him, and he had a horrible story, being tortured in
He became
Syria.
a prisoner of war and was treated
Yes.
very badly.
Very
But he
badly.
did survive.
He did survive. Now it's Monday. Yaya, with 5 of us in the bunker in El Al, is convincing one of the tank commander that if we don't take the main road between El Al and Tel Saki, we actually can make it to now bring back the people that we think still survive in Tel Saki. So typically it's a 10-minute drive, but we have to drive through the Syrian army. We have literally to drive these 5 tanks and 5 APC, because Yaya was determined based on his experience in the Six-Day War, not to have a situation that we don't bring the bodies of the fallen comrades back into burials into Israel. He was involved in something really bad experience in the Six-Day War, and he swore that time that it will never happen again. So he is with 5 tanks in front of us and a few APC armored vehicles. We now is convincing everyone that it's a possible mission to reach Tel Saki, because we hope that we'll be able to reach Tel Saki and the Israeli army will come by that time. And instead of 10 minutes, it's taking us approximately 4 hours. We lose most of the tanks that protected us on the way to there. When we get to the bottom of the hill, before we get to the bottom of the hill, when we look, before we reach Tel Saki, when we look with binoculars, we see Syrian army on the top, on the hill. So by that time, we think that they very likely didn't survive. And when we reach at the bottom of the hill of Tel Saki, there is a Syrian platoon, or maybe 2 platoons, that occupy Tel Saki and its vicinity. And the 2 tanks that actually came to our assistance, we actually are able to conquer 5 of us against probably 30 or 40 Syrians, and we conquered the hill. But now we conquered the Tel Saki hill, but we're still inside, in the middle of Syrian enclave.
While you're going up to Tel Saki,
Yes,
in this convoy,
yes,
and some of the tanks that are with you are lost,
yes.
are you frightened?
No,
Why not?
I'm determined. The only part of the war that I was frightened was in the very beginning of the war, when they bombarded us for a few hours and we couldn't do anything. We were locked inside the bunker. I think at this juncture, it's, when people ask about the feelings, I can just equate it to a burning house, and a parent hears their children screaming or asking for help inside the house. Are the flames very difficult to deal with and are frightening? Absolutely. But by this juncture, when we thought that there still some survived, and we knew that Yitzhak Nan survived, actually I thought, when I think back, I think at this point we were like mad. That's the feeling, we were mad, because we knew that they killed so many of us. We were mad and determined. We understood already there's no help coming to help us. And we were determined that whatever it takes, we are standing our ground, and in the process, we're going to take as many of them as possible.
What happens?
And we come to Tel Saki, we conquered the hill back. They're shooting at us, and I believe, by the way, that also the Israeli army is shooting at us because they don't believe that this convoy reached Tel Saki. So we get bombarded. Some of the Syrians, and Menachem tells it from his perspective in the movie, some of the Syrians that own Tel Saki go inside his own bunker to hide from the artillery.
A Syrian soldier backs into the bunker,
Yes,
never realizes that right behind him
yes,
are living Israeli soldiers, whom, if he recognized, he would have gunned them down.
yes.
Stays there to protect himself from the fire that is coming into Tel Saki.
Yeah, few of them, not one, few of them.
Few of them.
Yes.
Only when the firing stops do they go forward. And because they backed in, they never realized there were living Israeli soldiers behind them.
Yes, and this Israeli soldier.
And the Israeli soldiers in the film describe how they took their grenades, they took the pins out of the grenades, and were ready to use them in basically what was a last suicidal mission if you're going to kill us, we're going to kill you too.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, these Syrian soldiers leave the bunker, and now the Israelis are stuck with grenades in their hands that have no pins. And Menachem describes they take the bobby pin from their kippah, the yarmulke, and insert it into the grenade to keep the grenades from going off. Is that a fabulous story?
Yes. You see, this is an advantage of being wearing a yarmulke. So, here's one advantage. You can take, although the pins is such a small thing, you couldn't find it on the floor. And actually, some of them did not find the pins all the way to the end of this battle, and they had to hold the grenade armed in their hands all the way to the end. So Menachem takes the pin from his yarmulke and puts it, and we learned in special ops, this is actually excellent replacement if you have no other choices. And then one of the Syrian officers that we captured at the Battle of Tel Saki is telling us that actually a few of the bodies of our friends were booby-trapped. Yaya wants to make sure that it's us bringing the bodies of our own friends back to burial. And he's saying, listen, I was trained in explosives. And so then, that's like I repeat what you said in the movie. He said, listen, it's going to be very difficult. These people are not people that you just happened to meet for the first time. These people that I spent the past 2 to 3 years with some of them, very people that I loved. You're going to have to go one by one and make sure that to touch the body.
In essence, this brings us back to where we started.
Yes.
And when I said to you, what was this war to you, and did it affect your soul? And you said the part that was the hardest for you was this part.
Yes.
Where you had to now go and identify, confirm that they were dead, actually record for the families. This was, you had to do this so that the families of these fallen soldiers could have closure themselves. And this is made clear in the movie.
Yes.
And so this was the hardest part. But in essence, you're doing this as the Tel Saki saga is being won, correct?
Yes.
And in the end, this is the way it ends. Somehow, Menachem and the 3 or 4 people who had survived the initial, of the 5 that were there, survived for 3 days under unbelievable circumstances. I want you to tell one more story. You're the one who puts a soldier on the helicopter?
Yes.
Tell the story.
So we passed through all the wounded, the gravely wounded, and we had to identify, we had 2 doctors with us, so we had to identify which one of them is more gravely, because we had only 1 helicopter, and helicopter has only 3 places for evacuation. So Menachem and another guy, Lazy, and Shaike, the guy that was about to get strangled, those are the 3 places. And as I passed by one of the stretches, I see a guy that couldn't breathe. And I go to the doctor, Michael Gondel, and I say, Michael, the guy, if we don't put in a helicopter, he's going to die. He cannot breathe. And he goes to, the guy's name is Moti Aviam, and he goes and takes his shirt off, and he realized that he has a wound penetrated that collapsed his lungs, and he was bleeding through his mouth. And I told him, I said, if we don't bring him, he's going to perish. And I go to the helicopter pilot, and I said, is it possible to put one more person, even if they squeeze him? He said, no, it's not possible. I said, well, how about if I'm going to take the gun from the gun turret, since it was war all around us. So all this I'm explaining, it was still people shooting at each other, the Syrian retreating, coming back, our artillery shooting. So the helicopter pilot had to move really fast from Tel Saki. And I said, since it's war, and this machine gun is not going to help you anyway, let me remove the machine gun. And I found something that we used to use to clean our weapons. It looks, you can make a rope. We learned, how to, over the years to make a rope. And so I'll take the machine gun off, and I'm going to tie him to the turret of the machine gun. So he said, if you can, go ahead and do it. So I took the machine gun off, and I set him next to the turret of of the machine gun, and I took a lot of this. We call it ptilia, but it's kind of a rope, and I tied him to the turret, and he made it to the hospital.
You helped save this man's life.
I saved his life. Today he's a professor for archaeology, one of the most known in Israel.
What's his name?
Moti Aviam.
Moti Aviam.
He's a phenomenal human being, the nicest human being. I didn't know him back then, by the way. He was in a armored tanks, so when I saved him, I did not know who he was. But we later, became friends. Obviously, now for the past 8 years, we have a phenomenal bond, and he's part of our foundation.
First of all, thank you for just telling the story the way you did. And again, if people see the film, it becomes more vivid, but just as you tell it, it's an extraordinary, fantastic story. And one of the things that's said, and I want to hear what you have to say about it, is that one of the reasons why the Israeli has prevailed is that while the Arabs can have a battle and lose and come back, the Jew cannot afford to ever lose. Israel will only lose once.
Yes.
And therefore, what you and your friends and the extraordinary people of the state of Israel, and sometimes,
Yes.
Dan, you'll hear American Jews talk about Israel as if it's an idea. It's not
Yes.
an idea.
Yes.
It is people. It's our family.
Yes.
You're talking about human beings who, whether they light Shabbat candles or
Yes.
don't, whether they go to fast on Yom Kippur or not, they're family. We're the
Yes.
Jewish people. And Israel is at the moment an extraordinary social experiment of the Jewish people to live once again in our ancestral homeland and to try to create a just and loving society.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And what you understand somewhere inside you, we are
Yes.
told, is that you are on the front line all the time. You can never
Yes.
afford to lose once.
Yes.
I want to know to what extent you believe there is truth to that, or is it more slogan than truth?
No, it's very much true. It's very much true. And what differentiates us from our neighbors, that we as people, number one, celebrate life. We value life. And I can go back to our particular paratrooper unit, and the word in Hebrew will be shlichut, a mission. We truly believed in our heart of hearts. Many of us Holocaust survivors, families, sons to first-generation Holocaust survivors, that the Holocaust could never, ever happen. We have one homeland. We have no other place to go. And since my parents and Menachem's parents and Ben Hanan's parents, we all came from this profound loss of the Holocaust, we were determined, and Ido Aroni, the ambassador, used this word last night, that we truly, in our unit, we believed that it was our time, our shlichut, our mission to protect the Jewish people and the state of Israel. And it was not a duty, it was a privilege. It was a privilege for us, and not only to go to the army and do infantry and to do some mundane job. We wanted to do the best. I'm using Ido's words, to be the Maccabees of our generation.
Mm-hmm.
And
so, Dan, to what extent is today's Israeli youth, to what extent does today's Israeli youth share the sentiment you've just described so beautifully?
So I can tell you that I just got back from Israel, from Tel Saki, and there were thousands of people in Tel Saki. And I had the privilege to give a day tour and share the story with today's warriors, that what our unit today's serving in today. And it was probably one of the most humbling experience to see this 19 and 20-year-old 40 years later with the same love and determination. And what I use the word shlichut, and mission in life, to understand that it's their time and they're privileged to protect not only the state of Israel, because Israel not only protects, and this is what I hope to convey to the audience, Israel is for the Jewish people. The Jewish people around the world will not have the luxury to live the life that they can live and express themselves without the state of Israel. Mm-hmm. It's not an idea. It's part of who we are as people. Mm-hmm. And these young guys that from the said unit absorbed and cherished every single word or verb that we told them, Menachem and I that day. And it was very profound experience to see that this passion still exists.
You did this with Menachem?
Yes.
You see him often?
I speak to him almost every day, sometimes more than once.
In the film, you say that when you called him, and it took you a long time to decide to call him.
Yes.
It seemed to me, Dan, that for a while you just wanted to step away from it. And then something drew you back in and you called Menachem, and he remembered you. Not only did he remember you, he remembered your own serial number.
Yes.
And he called you by your serial number.
Yes.
But I got chills when I heard that.
Yes.
So you and he often speak together.
Yes.
How's he doing, by the way?
He's doing great.
What's he doing in life?
He's a consultant for a high-tech company that deals with detecting explosives and drugs.
Very good.
He's an entrepreneur.
Okay.
He has 14 grandkids.
Really?
6
Mazel
kids.
tov. And
Yes.
how about you?
I have 2 kids. I have 1 grandchild.
Mazel tov.
Toda.
Out of left field for you.
Yes,
Do you hate Arabs?
absolutely not.
They tried to kill you.
Yes.
They destroyed 35 of your comrades.
Yes.
You have had pain in your life unspeakable. It's hurt your soul. Do you hate Arabs?
No. No.
How come?
Because I truly believe that the foundation of people is a good foundation. I don't like to to generalize labels about religion or regions. Over the years, when I was going to school here, I had several people from Arab countries that were my friends that went to school. And I truly believe in the essence of my being that we'll be able to have a peace in the Middle East one day.
Do you believe there are Palestinians in the Palestinian Authority, in the Palestinian hierarchy, who are ready to live with the State of Israel in peace?
I definitely do. And I will differentiate between the Palestinians that live in Gaza, the one that lives in the Palestinian Authority on the West Bank, which I know better. The Palestinians on the West Bank are primarily farmers. They understand cause and effect. For the longest period of time, if one looks at tapes after the Six-Day War, many of them greeted the Israeli army with flowers and rice and candy. I think certain things were lost in translation, and I think it takes people like ourselves that fought and lost and our blood is on the ground to bridge this gap. I feel differently with people that like the Hamas, that don't recognize Israel's right to exist. That being said, because I am the chairman of the foundation for the Tel Saki warriors, I'm trying very, very much to not to convey a line of thinking about politics. But I can definitely say that, and I don't want to speak in behalf of all the people that survived Tel Saki, that we are determined to do everything possible so there'll be no more wars. Because wars, as I said last night, There's nothing beautiful about war. And no matter which side wins or loses, everyone loses in war. The best wars are the one that you avoid.
You know, American Jews tend to romanticize the Israeli army and the wars that Israel has fought. And you understand, I have the highest regard for this civilian army, and by the way, there are also professionals who are out of this world.
Yes.
So I'm not in any way trying to say anything one whit critical of the IDF, which I think has the highest moral standards and has proven it
Yes.
time and time again. But I don't like romanticizing war, even if the army is the IDF. And when I hear you talk about, and you know, I've never been in battle. No one's ever shot at me. I've never had to shoot at somebody else. Most American Jews, we grow up in total safety.
Yes.
And you live through hell.
Yes.
You live through hell,
Yes.
Dan, okay? And then you say right now, there is no winners in war.
No. There's no winners in war. And I truly believe that the simple person that lives in this region believes that there must be a way to bridge the gap between these two people. After all, we cousins in some, going back some generations. We share a lot of our culture, a lot of our foods. You know, for many, many years, it was phenomenal to do business one another. We understand each other thinking. We complement each other. And once they recognize our right as people, as human beings, to exist in our homeland, I think that will be the breaking point in this negotiation. This recognition that we have right as human beings to live in the only homeland that we have. It's a little tiny, smaller than New Jersey, piece of land. Then everything else will be worked out.
Incidentally, just so our audience understands, after the war, you ultimately did move to the United States. You studied in the United States.
Yes.
You built a career in the United States.
Yes.
You're in the banking industry here in the
Yes.
United States. But you didn't leave Israel.
No.
You are always in Israel.
Yes.
And then you've created this extraordinary museum at Tel Saki, which everybody who's listening to us now, everybody who's watching L'Chaim on Shalom TV, anytime they go to Israel, they will be doing themselves a favor if they can get to the Golan Heights with somebody who can really take them to the museum
Yes.
and to see this, what Tel Saki means to the Israeli people and the Israeli young people, as
Yes.
well as your generation. So I want everyone to understand that you are an example of an Israeli who, while you have made your home in America to some extent, you've never left Israel.
No. No, my soul, by the way, will always be in Tel Saki.
Yes.
When I go to Israel, I'm sharing with the audience something very private. I always go to Tel Saki and I watch the sunrise over Tel Saki. It's a beautiful hill. It's what we build our foundation that it's called the Friendship and Heritage Foundation. It's an education foundation. They can find us on the internet with more information. I watch the sunrise over Tel Saki, and my soul is there. This year alone, I was probably more than a dozen times in Israel. I'm very involved. My business career is here in the U.S. I am in investment banking. I'm a chairman of some public companies here in the U.S. But the might of my essence of my life is my family, which for 25 years did not know the story of Tel Saki.
Because you didn't tell them.
I did not tell them, and my wife from the very beginning instructed them not to ask.
Did you marry in Israel?
I married in Israel
And then you come to America
came here.
with your wife?
with my wife.
Okay. And,
Yes.
and she has shared your life.
She's Israeli, she's Tzabarit.
Okay. And she understood that your children should not touch this subject.
Yes.
And that at some point you become ready to talk about it.
Yes. When we met, probably was a very strange conversation because the story of my marriage is very special as it is. We met a week later, we decided to get married. 3 months later, we were married. We are happily married for 37 years.
What a wonderful love story.
Yes. And
So are you a romantic,
I'm
Dan
very
Almagor?
romantic. I'm very romantic, although the romantic part was hard to reach in the very beginning, the emotional part. So when we first met, I said, I have only two things that I want to ask from the relationship. I want to call our first son Ronnie, after my best friend Ronnie. And two, one day when we build our own house, I would like to have a kosher home. And I grew up in a totally secular, opposite to religious home. And she said, fine.
Why did you want a kosher home if you grew up in a secular Jewish home?
Ronnie was my best friend in this paratrooper unit. It was a guy that everyone liked. He was funny. His name was Ronnie Herzenstein. And I always felt, in an unrealistic manner, by the way, now I understand, that maybe if we reached Tel Saki quicker, maybe I could have saved his life. And I met his mom and his brother and sister after the war, and I made a promise that I will make sure that I'll call our first son Ronnie. When I reached, so that has to do with calling our son Ronnie. When we reached the foothill of Tel Saki, and after we finished the Battle of Tel Saki, and we're going to gather the bodies of our fallen friends, the first one was the body of Benny Hanani. And I kneeled next to his body to check, as I say in the movie, to see if he was booby-trapped. And almost in a surreal manner was his kippah, because everything was dusty, gray dust from the Golan and black soot. And here next to his head, they took his helmet away, the Syrians. So next to his head was laying his white and blue kippah with blood stain on it. And it was a picture that was bothered me a long time. It was in my mind for a very, very, very long time. I saw the sight of this white kippah in the middle of darkness. So when I finished, when the war ended, and I wanted to remember him, that was part of who he was, this white and blue kippah. I wanted to do something to always keep him and who he was in my memories, this experience. So I decided after the war, although I didn't know much about religion, to wear a kippah. And for a very short period of time, probably a lot of my friends, if anyone will see it, that will be a surprise for them too. I'm sharing this story for the first time. And I realized that it was not, the kippah itself was not what would make the differentiation. And it was not who I was as a human being. But it was a transition to a way of life. I said, what can I do to mimic who he was as a human being? The kippah will not bring him to make me feel who he was as a human being. But I said he was always very particular about keeping kashrut. So I said, well, I'm going to learn how to have a kosher home. And we have a strict kosher home. Even Menachem, that he's religious, when it comes to our house, he doesn't know where to leave the spoon. Because I don't know enough, I go overboard to keep a kosher home. And the third promise was the one that I shared with you before about on top of this hill to tell the story. That was the public aspect of the promise. And that's why I created this foundation, the Friendship and Heritage Foundation, to tell the story to the world.
Menachem describes how he didn't talk about it either.
No.
And then one day, he and his wife see a movie.
Yes.
And he describes how he gets in the car.
Yes.
He and his wife are silent.
Yes.
And his wife turns to him and says, "So what was that like for you?"
Yes.
Boy, I'm going to cry myself. And Menachem starts weeping.
Yes.
And he says, I didn't even know. It's a flood of tears.
Yes.
He can barely even see the road. He
Yes.
describes this.
Yes.
And how he, in essence, it's like everything had built up and he had held it inside.
Yes.
And then at this one moment, it just came pouring out of him.
Yes.
Was there ever a similar moment for you?
Yes. I had almost an identical, just a world away. I went with my wife to see the movie The Saving Private Ryan. And Steven Spielberg does a phenomenal job on D-Day, on the landing on the beach, very realistic. And my body starts shaking. And like Menachem, I've never heard myself cry before. We as paratroopers, special ops, we don't cry. We're tough. The whole world stands on our shoulders. And I start crying at this movie that my wife, at the time of more than 25 years, never realized that I ever cried. She never saw me emotional like this. And we had to leave. And I couldn't catch my breath. And she said, listen, what's wrong? I didn't tell her. She did not know the story of Tel Saki at this juncture yet. She did not make the connection. She said, does it remind you anything that what happened when Ronnie was, because that's the one thing she knew. And I just broke down and I cried, I think, what seems to me now for like days. And she said, listen, you need to do something about it. And as my brother-in-law, Ron, her brother, said, there's a site in Israel, it's called Hevre, which is friends. Maybe you can find some of your friends. And I went to the computer, I typed Menachem Ansbacher, and he was online. And I said, Menachem, Dan Almagor, do you remember me? And he responded real time with my serial number. And we called each other on the phone and said, before you come, there was a book written in English called Crying for Ima.
Crying for Mother.
Yes, Crying for Mother. It's in English by the cousin of Jacob Ramon that was at Tel Saki, made Aliyah. It was from Seattle. At 14 years old, his parents moved to Israel. He volunteered to the army, to the infantry, to the paratroopers, and became a medic in our special unit. And he died at Tel Saki. And she wanted to learn about who he was as a person, and she spent better part of 3 years. And she was successful of reaching 5 of us. And she wrote the book, and I basically cried for a week. I was reading because she has some pictures on this book. And another good friend of mine here in New York said that I trust her judgment. She said, listen, you need to go and see Menachem. You have to see him. And I got on a plane the next day, and he and I sat, after not seeing each other for 25 years, at a restaurant in Tel Aviv by the Mediterranean. And I think we sat down for 4 hours. We cried for 3. Mind you that the last time I saw him, he was flying with a helicopter, to the hospital. And we're really tough, trained to be tough as nails in our unit. And that was the foundation of starting this wonderful education foundation. And we really focus, although in Israel they like to focus on the story of 57 against 11,000, we focused on how love and care and values can make the impossible possible. And with this passion, because especially kids today, when they think their life is difficult, we want to put it in perspective what difficult means. 20-year-old boys that seeing death but overcoming fear, seeing difficulty and dealing with this perspective of difficulties. And the most difficult, it just helps people to put things in perspective. And we see the effect as we go.
What a gift you have given in so much of your life. Do you still cry?
I do.
You can cry now. For a long time you never cried, and now you can cry. Have your children ever seen you cry?
I don't think so.
But they understand more of who you are now.
Yes.
Have your children been to Tel Saki?
Yes. My children been to Tel Saki. My grandson been to Tel Saki. I'm not sure, this is one of the challenges as a father, because for 25 years we didn't talk about it.
Yes.
Now that it's a central part of my life and my drive and what I do, they still are very apprehensive of asking me. They still are afraid to
They're protecting their Abba.
They're protecting their Abba.
Yes.
They're protecting their Abba. My wife's has seen me cry. One of the things that after we started the foundation, the family of my fallen friends asked me to go with them to Tel Saki to show them where I found their loved ones. I couldn't go to just one particular place because you have to go to a situation. And for me, that was probably one of the most harder than the war itself.
Yes, I believe it. I believe it. You have enormous strength, you have enormous courage, and you have enormous soul.
Thank you.
You're the best of what the Jewish people are, and that you have devoted so much of your energy.
Thank you.
Not simply to Tel Saki, but to telling a larger story, of which Tel Saki is, in some way the quintessential moment for you, but it's a larger story. You're telling the story of the Jewish people. You understand that, Dan?
Yes.
You are
Yes.
telling the story of the Jewish people, and you do it in a loving, articulate, wonderful, wonderful way. And again, I want to be your friend for the rest of your life. You are an extraordinary human being. I wish you kol tuva hatzlacha in everything you do. May the museum at Tel Saki and all the work you do, may it just grow and flourish and flourish. It should be always known about on Shalom TV. We'll promote it. Everybody who goes to Israel has to be there. But I thank you for this kind of time. You are extraordinary. Yotzei min haklal. Yotzei min haklal. Toda rabba.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to say, I waited 40 years to have this interview. I've never given, they asked me from the Israeli TV many, many times to give interviews. And for some reason, watching you and understanding the affinity, that you really understands the essence of us as people, who we are and what's important in life, what are really important, and what's vain. And I said, if I'm going to do it and I'm going to open up and share my inner thoughts and feelings, it has to be you. So
I am very grateful. I am flattered. I get chills. I am humbled, and I am grateful. So before we close, give it one more time. If anybody wants to find out about your foundation, what's the website?
The website is the www.friendshipandheritage.org. Also, we can be found at telsaki.org or com, both, or on Facebook, Tel Saki. We're on Tel Saki, become our friend Tel Saki. On Facebook, you'll see our events. We need everyone's help to help us with continuing to tell our story to the world and building on the foundation that we've already done.
Chazak, chazak.
Toda.
Okay? Just from strength to strength from you.
Thank
and
you.
You'll always have a seat at this table. So
Thank you.
I'll finally let you go if you promise to one day sit in there.
I will.
Thank you.
I will.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our conversation with Dan Almagor, his movie is The Battle Over the Soul. He produced it. But what it's really about is who this human being is. And you've met an extraordinary human being, as I said to him, I really feel in many ways. He reflects what the Jewish people have been from the time we began with Abraham and then left Egypt to create an entire culture a way of looking at life, an embrace of life is what the Jewish tradition is. And we stood together at Sinai, and Dan Almagor was there, and he continues to represent the best of Israel, the best of the Jewish people. I hope you've enjoyed meeting him as much as I do, and I hope you love him now like I do. As always, you know I'd love to hear anything you have to say about the ideas that Dan has described, his experiences about this conversation. Please take the time to be in touch with us. Email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, tweet me. I look forward to hearing from you. As always, if you want to be in touch with Dan Almagor, you can do so by emailing me, and I will forward your emails on to him. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'chaim, my friends, to life.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM. To GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.